A couple of things. Let me just speak to the perception issue briefly. There are many different parts and aspects of the challenges with homelessness, so I'll just speak to the facts related to shelter and the need for housing-focused shelter. And I use the term housing-focused shelter. That's a shorthand for me to encompass the kinds of things that Councilmember Kassar brought up, and I think others have brought up too. I use the term housing-focused because what that means is the shelter plus the services to move people into permanent housing as soon as possible. So when I say housing-focused shelter, I mean that's one and the same. So the facts with regard to shelter is that we have increased significantly. I consider significantly. That's a judgment call on my part. But I think having over 1,000 people unsheltered, I think it's really important to look at these statistics. We have, the last point in time count was over, I think it was 1,087 to be precise, in Austin and Travis County, was 1,037, if I'm understanding correctly, or 30-something, for unsheltered in the city of Austin. Unsheltered means living on the streets, living in green belts, place that they don't have shelter. That is a bigger number. There is no, it is increasing, and that is a fact. Now, let's talk about the Echo Point in Time count. Echo Point in Time count is where volunteers from all over the city go, and it's a census essentially. I consider it to be an undercount. But it's telling us that we've got at least that many people living on the streets at that particular point in time for the count. So I don't want us to say that, I don't want us to play with numbers and say, compare percentages of this and that and the other. The bottom line is we have more people living on the streets unsheltered, and that's what our hard data shows us. So the other thing I would say is, I agree that there's a lot of education that would be helpful for people in the community. I do that as much as I can when I talk to people that I hear from in my district. And there are a lot of questions that we all have. But I do think that there is one thing that they do understand, and that is that people live on this, that there is a need for housing. As the National Alliance told us, people are homeless because they don't have a place to live. And people are unsheltered because they don't have a place to live. There's no confusion about that. And I think that that is something that our constituents recognize. So I just want to pull those two facts out of the conversation. I don't think the public is wrong. I don't think the people that are talking to me about the folks living under bridges in their area are wrong or confused when they think in terms of people needing shelter. So with that said, I do recognize that there is a lot of misinformation out there and lack of understanding and stuff, and people want to understand, and so we need to share that. So let me just ask the question. My understanding is that what we're talking about today is a recommendation that we do need increased shelter plus services. I'll call it housing-focused shelter. Am I understanding correctly that that is a recommendation from our homeless strategy officer? And I really thank you for stepping up to the plate. I know that you have just dived in, whatever. Anyway, you have reached out to all the experts. We've had the benefit of talking to the National Alliance as the experts, what they've seen around the country. So my question is, are you pointing out that there is an additional need for housing-focused shelter, and are you recommending that we do what we can to proceed with that?
We do recommend that there's a need for additional shelter, housing focused, absolutely. As I'd mentioned in my presentation, I think that housing focus happens the minute somebody enters that shelter. We need to immediately
Okay.
start talking about housing options and knowing that that housing requires wraparound services as well,
Okay.
but fully fledged shelter.
Okay. Well, then I would just say that item 49 does three things. It takes the next step towards moving towards additional housing-focused shelter. It asks our staff to proceed with the process that we'll have more conversation in executive session about, and that's a location. To proceed with the process for determining how much it would cost, and I appreciate the estimate of the 2.5, but how much it would cost in terms of who would be a service provider. And it moves forward with the process of identifying funds in the budget, which of course we'll all have to deal with in August when we deal with the budget. I also would like to say that we also need to support the Salvation Army Center, Rathgaber. But I don't see these as either or. When we look at the numbers for additional shelter that's needed, we need them both. And I hope we don't end up suggesting that we need one or the other. No one has said that. I just want to keep saying that over and over again, that we need both. The other thing I think we need to recognize about shelter, and I really appreciate, this is very helpful information to tell us the existing beds that are out there and what their focus is, that I think we need to remember the importance of looking at shelters around the city. We've had a focus on downtown, which is appropriate and necessary, but homeless people don't just live downtown. And so I think it's important that we also, as we look at as we move forward with the housing focused shelter that we need, that we recognize that we need to provide services for people throughout town and not just downtown. And I think that the shelters that we have on the ground, first off, if you add up the numbers, they don't reach what we need. Many of them are focused on the most vulnerable populations, which is necessary and appropriate. But we also don't have what we need in terms of the 1,000+ that are living on the streets right now. Mm-hmm. So I just want to encourage us to think about the Salvation Army opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to help a community organization get over the line. But that doesn't address the housing focused shelter that we need in the community. So we need to be thinking about moving forward with both. So,
Kathy.